One day, in the old apartment I used to live in, the neighbours started to make noise regularly at the same time each night. At 11:30, it was the laundry. At midnight, the sound of the bath. Then at 1 a.m, finishing the laundry. I could hear this every single night. They're so noisy. I should mention this to management, I thought. One night I was thirsty, so I went to the nearby convenience store to grab something. On the way back, I looked at the neighbouring apartment and saw the lights were off. But as soon as I entered my apartment, I could hear those same noises. I called management the next day. "Excuse me, but is someone living next door to me right now?" "Huh? The tenant moved out a few days ago, so the apartment is currently empty. Did something happen?" For some reason, I wasn't scared, but rather, I thought it was interesting that apparently ghosts kept routines as well. "No, nothing," I said, and then hung up. When the noises started again that night, I tried talking to the ghost. "I don't mind you taking a bath, but can you not do the laundry so late at night, please?" The next day, they stopped doing the laundry. A few weeks later, somebody new moved into that apartment and the noises stopped. I wonder if that ghost moved as well. Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. The latest volume of Kowabana, volume 16, is now available. If you want even more creepy tales of ghosts, haunted buildings, curses, mysterious rituals, and much more, make sure to check it out right now. And if you're looking for more to listen to, you can also find the audiobook for Kijo, Japan's most notorious female criminals, either on our Patreon, Fourth Wall store, or various audiobook outlets, including Spotify and Audible, so don't miss out on that either if you're still looking for more. This week, we're looking at some terrifying and bizarre tales of rather unconventional encounters. Who exactly are these people? Or ghosts? And what is it that they're after? First up, a young man's grandfather loved playing pranks on him when he was a child, but it seems not even death can keep him from his mischievous ways. Find out why in Grandpa the Prankster. This year was our first Obon since my grandfather died last year. Being that I was his eldest grandchild, I was rather busy reading letters and such, and also getting lanterns from the temple and setting them out across the water. His grave was also at the top of a huge hill, so once I was done cleaning it, I basically passed out once I got back to the house. On August 16th, the last day of Obon, it was still just as hot as the previous day. We live in the countryside, so the cicadas are loud enough that you can also hear them indoors. I finished my final visit to my grandfather's grave in this intense heat, and then, drenched in sweat, returned home. I went to the room with our Buddhist altar, threw open all the doors, and then passed out to sleep. I was so tired that I accidentally fell asleep with my feet facing my grandfather's altar. But at the time, I was so exhausted that I didn't even think about it. I just threw my arms and legs out and passed out. When he was alive, my grandfather was always so childish that he didn't even seem like an old man. He especially loved playing pranks on me, which would then lead to us fighting. Like, when I was taking a nap, he'd put ice on my forehead. Or he sometimes put daikon radish in my school bag. And when I got angry, he'd laugh at me. And maybe that was just the type of person he was, but he always played with me like a child as well. When we caught jewel beetles together, or piled dirt on Grandma's dresser so it looked like poop, he would laugh and run around with me, and get angry and sad with me as well. Still, secretly, I was proud of him for doing such stupid things with me. I loved that he played with me like I was a friend. A year had passed since he died. I cried at his funeral, but when I thought about him now, I was a little less sad than before. I think he'd no doubt want me to feel that way as well, instead of being constantly sad about his passing. Anyway, next thing I knew, even though I was barely awake, I could have sworn I heard something. It sounded like something rubbing against the vinyl tatami mats on the outside veranda above me. Maybe Grandma's back, I thought, and moments later I felt a cold sensation on my forehead, like ice. No, something even colder than that. I screamed like a child and sat bolt upright. Looking at where my face had just been, I saw there was a freezing cold bottle of vitamin drink lying on the floor. Grandma! Grandma! If you're gonna wake me up, at least say something first, I yelled down the hall. But there was no response. I got up and called out to her again by the door, but the only response was the strange echo of my own voice. When I went over to the front door, only my shoes and my grandfather's shoes were there. Come to think of it, my grandmother did say she was going to a relative's house, right? Thoroughly confused, I went back to the room, and the vitamin drink that had been lying on the ground was now standing up. Was it you, Grandpa? I said, approaching the small photo of him on the altar. Of course, he didn't answer, but beneath his photo glistened a few drops of cold water. Can't stop playing pranks even after death, huh? Laughing, I looked up at his picture and, like always, his nose hairs were poking out. But his smile also seemed just a little bigger than usual. Two sisters decide to play hide and seek when they're left alone at the house one day. But are they really as alone as they seem? Will they perhaps find something else there with them? Find out in Older Sister versus the Tiny Hand. I heard this story from my teacher when I was in junior high. One day, two young sisters were home alone. Their parents wouldn't be back until that evening. With too much time on their hands and no idea what to do with it, the older sister then suggested that they play hide and seek in the house. They played rock, scissors, paper to determine who would hide first, and because the older sister lost, she closed her eyes and counted, while her younger sister ran downstairs to hide. Then her younger sister hid in a closet. "I'm done counting! I'm coming now!" the older sister cried from the second floor, and the sound of her footsteps descending the stairs echoed. She no doubt heard her sister doing the same. She searched all over, opening and closing this and that. Her younger sister was confident she wouldn't be found though. She tucked herself away tightly, deep in the corner of a closet, so even if her sister opened it and looked inside, she wouldn't see her. And she likely wouldn't dig any further inside either. A short while later, the younger sister started to feel sleepy inside the closet. But then she heard her older sister call out, "Ah! Found you!" That wasn't possible. The closet doors were still closed. This had to be part of her sister's plan to lure her out. Once she heard that she had been found, she was supposed to stick her head out and give away where she actually was. And so, she remained hidden in the closet, merely listening to her sister's voice outside. "I found you! Come out now!" I said come out! Now! At first, her older sister's voice was calm, but then it started to become more frantic and rough. Come out right now! That's enough! You're making me angry! Get out here right this very second! The younger sister then heard her banging on the walls. Growing afraid at her sister's anger at not finding her, the younger sister reluctantly crawled out of the closet. She found her sister in Western-style clothing standing in front of another closet. There, she saw a small white hand reaching out of that closet, desperately trying to pull her older sister in. The younger sister screamed, and when her older sister realized where she was, that small hand suddenly tried to pull her in. When their parents got home that night, the girls cried as they tried to tell them what happened. Of course, they didn't believe them. But they apparently never saw that small hand again either. A young American boy grows up loving Japan, and when he finally visits the country on a family trip, he encounters a rather unique ghost who appears to be helping him. But why? Find out in My Father and the Samurai. This is a strange experience my father had when he was younger. My father is American. Apparently, he always loved Japan as a kid, so when he grew up, he moved here. But when he was 9, his family came to Japan for a vacation, perhaps precisely because of his love for the country. He was super excited and devoured his Japanese guidebook on the way over. Apparently, they traveled all around the Kanto region, visiting areas like Nikko and Kinugawa and Shinjuku and Asakusa. My father held this image in his mind that Japan equals ninja and samurai, so he was shocked when he didn't see any. So shocked that he ended up throwing his beloved toy sword that he had brought with him from America in the trash because of it. However, he regretted it immediately, and he spent all night crying at the inn once they got back from sightseeing. But then, when everyone was asleep in the quiet room, he saw a samurai standing right in front of him. He was like, "Oh my God!" And the samurai slowly approached him before handing over the toy sword he had thrown away. "Thank you very much," my father said, and then excitedly continued talking to the samurai in English. However, the samurai simply smiled and remained silent. Then he disappeared like a puff of smoke. For some reason, my father felt like he shouldn't tell anyone about this, so he kept it to himself. And for the next week, this samurai continued to pop up while they were sightseeing. It seemed only my father could see him, however, and the samurai always smiled gently at him. Even when they got lost one day, the samurai held out his right hand, indicating for them to go right, and so they found their way to their destination. Because he was unable to communicate with him, my father drew a picture of him and the samurai holding hands. And the night before he was due to fly back to America, the samurai suddenly appeared before him again. "Together! Chicago! Let's go!" my father said to him in simple Japanese. But the samurai sadly shook his head. "Please, please," my father continued in English, tears falling from his eyes. The samurai quietly wiped his tears away, and then handed him a small bottle full of tiny, colourful stars. In return, my father gave him the picture he had drawn of them. "We'll see each other again, right?" my father asked. The samurai again smiled sadly and disappeared. After returning home, my father never saw that samurai again. But as he got older and became an adult, he became sure of one thing. That tiny bottle of kompeito candy that the samurai gave him was meant to be a parting gift. A sign that he knew the pair would never meet again. It was a way to say thank you for coming to love Japan, his country, and to apologize for now leaving him all alone. In this next story, a young man's grandfather develops dementia and, before long, starts to believe he's a famous villain of disguise. He runs his family ragged with his tricks, but is this, once again, another grandfather who can't stop even once he reaches the other side? Find out in The Fiend with 20 Faces. Around 10 years ago, my grandfather developed dementia. At first, he mostly just forgot things, but before long his behaviour was clearly strange as well. Sometimes he would act like he thought he was an entirely different person, and this person was none other than Edogawa Rampo's The Fiend with 20 Faces. My grandfather was in a theatrical troupe back in the day, and apparently he had taken on that particular role before, so, according to the doctor, this was a result of those images strongly resurfacing in his mind. But that wasn't all. He was also convinced that my father was Akechi Kogoro, Edogawa Rampo's star private detective, and I was his boy detective Kobayashi. Whenever he got the chance, he started playing all sorts of troublesome pranks on us. At first, he would do stuff like lock me in the toilet and then laugh, saying, "Ha ha ha, what now, Kobayashi-kun?" He also sneakily took my father's watch and hid it in the freezer. These things were annoying, sure, but not the end of the world. And we didn't blame him either. We just dealt with it the best we could. It wasn't like he thought he was the Fiend all the time either, so it was mostly like, here we go again. But looking back on it now, perhaps letting him get carried away like that wasn't the best idea. A short while later, something bad happened. Around this time, my grandfather usually locked me in the toilet when I was in there each morning. Usually, he'd open the door again when I screamed, "I give up, Fiend!" But on this particular day, he didn't respond. Normally, he would just push himself against the door to keep it closed, so I couldn't exactly kick it open. "I give up! You win!" I screamed louder, over and over. Then I heard a rustling sound outside. Finally, he's letting me out, I thought. But it was my father. Apparently, a stepladder had been placed against the door to keep it shut. My father was looking all around the house for the suit he wanted to wear, but he also couldn't find it. And then I heard my mother scream. "Ah! Thief!" We rushed to the kitchen, and she said she saw a man's feet dangling by the window. Seemed she had seen someone trying to climb onto the roof. It hit both my father and I at the same time. It couldn't be. Grandpa, right? Panicking, I ran out the back door, and sure enough, my grandfather was trying to climb onto the roof. For some reason, he was wearing my father's suit. He was probably trying to disguise himself as him. He had something wrapped in cloth under his armpit, and he was trying to make his way from the first floor roof to the second. We all turned pale at the sight of him, so we rushed to the second floor and climbed onto the roof from a room there. But by that point, my grandfather was already on the second floor roof as well. Disregarding our panic, he started staggering around and muttering something. Akechi-kun and Kobayashi-kun, you are too late. This is now mine. Ugh. By the time I'd had that thought, it was already too late. My grandfather dragged both my father and I, sending us tumbling to the first floor roof. The three of us rolled, and the momentum sent my father flying. I wanted to stop my grandfather somehow, but he was moving so fast that I couldn't. Before I knew it, we were at the edge of the roof, and then, finally, there was nothing beneath us at all. We're going to die, I honestly thought. But at the same time, I wanted to protect my grandfather. I grabbed him as tightly as I could, and together we hit the ground. Luckily, he only suffered light injuries, but the landing hit my arm so hard that it broke. We later discovered that the thing Grandpa had stolen at the time was a wooden carving of a bear from the alcove that we got as a souvenir from Hokkaido. Maybe it was the shock of that incident, but after that, my grandfather fully transformed into the Fiend. He started behaving more dangerously, and we weren't sure we could handle him if he did something like that again. But it was also around this time that we discovered he had cancer, and he had to be hospitalized. After that, my grandfather got visibly weaker day by day. But perhaps it was his pride as the Fiend that made him continue talking to us dramatically whenever we visited him in the hospital. And so, for the next 3 months, I always visited my grandfather as the boy detective Kobayashi. One night, the hospital contacted us and said that his condition had worsened, so the three of us rushed over. He was hooked up to a ventilator and already looked to be barely conscious. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" I called his name several times, but there was no response. This is it, I thought. "Hey! Fiend!" my father then suddenly yelled. How pathetic! My father wasn't the type of person who often got angry, so it surprised me a little. But tears were streaming down his face. "Are you really okay letting Akechi Kogoro win? Huh?" Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face too. "You fiend!" I screamed. But Grandpa never regained consciousness, and half an hour later, he passed away. But right before the end, he softly stroked my cheek as though to say, "Kobayashi-kun, you make sure you become a great detective, just like Akechi." After he passed away, I started seeing ghosts. I never had any sort of sixth sense before that, but now I see things. Sometimes a young man, sometimes a middle-aged woman. At first I didn't really notice them, but in time I started being able to tell them apart. Then they smile at me and disappear, like they're saying, "You did well, you found me." As you would expect from the master of disguise. Looks like the Fiend with 20 faces still hasn't learned his lesson, and is continuing his shenanigans from the other side. The young man in this next story recounts how, when his father was younger, he apparently resembled his then-deceased brother quite a bit. But was it really just a resemblance, or was there something else going on here? Find out in Reincarnation. This story is from when my now 50-year-old father was just a child. At the time, he didn't believe in anything related to the occult, and apparently he doesn't remember any of this, so I heard the story from my grandmother, his mother. My father has one older sister, but apparently he used to have an older brother, the firstborn son, who died in an accident when he was just 4 years old. This older brother was born 7 years before my father, meaning he died 3 years before he was born. Now, both my father and his older brother had 3 moles on the back of their necks that made an upside-down triangle, so his family used to joke that my father was his older brother reincarnated. However, the family were well and truly shocked when my father was just 2 years old. One evening, as they were eating dinner, my father suddenly started crying for Dumbo, Dumbo. Dumbo was what my father's older brother used to call dembu, a type of food made out of shredded fish that he really loved. And at the time, my father had never even seen, let alone eaten, dembu before. Sometimes he'd go over to his father and beg him to take him to the pata-pata. The nearby park had paddle boats that his older brother used to love, and he called them pata-pata. My father had apparently never even seen these boats before either. And while they were out walking, he pointed to a candy store that his older brother used to love and started dragging his father there as well. Another time, he entered a store he'd never been to before and walked straight over to a book titled The Lost Dog Chido. It was a book his older brother had loved. He showed it to his mother and started asking her about Chido and if he was okay. These sorts of things happened so often that the family really did start to question if my father was his older brother reincarnated. However, according to my father, his behavior started to change after he turned 4, and by the time he was 5, all of these strange coincidences stopped entirely. My father developed his own clear and distinct tastes and interests. At first, he always used to hang around, but I think he left once he was satisfied, my grandmother said. Personally, I think that my father's older brother returned for 2 or 3 years just to help his parents get through their grief. Sticking with fathers, the young man in this next story recounts a tale his father told him about a ghostly encounter that, oddly, may have saved his life. What was this ghost trying to do, really? Find out in Ex-Girlfriend's Ghost. This is a story my father secretly told me. About 10 years ago, my father suddenly woke up one night and couldn't move. Then he realized someone was on top of him. The hand touching him was cold, and water appeared to be dripping from it. Struggling to open his eyes, he then saw it was his ex-girlfriend from university. However, he heard that his ex-girlfriend died in an accident at sea some time after they broke up. Wondering if she still held some sort of grudge against him, the woman then pushed her hand into his torso, and, as she moved it around, excruciating pain shot through him. Next thing he knew, he had returned to his senses and his ex was gone. The sharp pain, however, remained. And that pain was still there the following morning, and painkillers did nothing to stop it. And for the next 2 days, his ex appeared each night and shoved her hand into his torso. The pain and lack of sleep started getting to him and caused him to mess up at work as well. "Go to the hospital right now," his angry boss ordered him. So, reluctantly, he went. Before this, my father already had back and hip pain, and because he had a desk job, He figured it must have gotten worse from all the sitting, so he visited an orthopedic surgeon. The chatty doctor also said it was probably just lower back pain, but as they were talking, my father then said, "Well, it was probably just a dream, but..." He then told him about the ghost of his ex, and how she twisted her hand around in his torso. "This might actually be an advance warning, so just in case, I think we should have you checked out," the doctor then said. According to him, the ghost was likely a hallucination. However, this was likely a hallucination his body created unconsciously in response to the pain and anxiety he was feeling around his torso. That might just be it, my father thought. So, just in case, he went to a different hospital and spoke to another much younger doctor. He explained why he was there, and the young doctor gave a wry laugh. "A ghost, huh? Well, just to ease your fears, let's do an MRI, okay?" he then said. Through the MRI, they discovered a shadow on his pancreas, so he was referred to a specialist in another hospital. He went there right away, and after some testing, they discovered it was the early stages of pancreatic cancer. "You're so lucky that we can operate on this," the doctor said, all excited. Apparently, pancreatic cancer doesn't really have any noticeable symptoms, so people don't usually discover it until it's too late. According to the specialist, it was hard to imagine the pain was that terrible at this early stage, but he praised the superb judgment of the orthopedic surgeon in recommending he have a closer look at it. My father never told the specialist about the ghost. In the end, they were able to completely get rid of the pancreatic cancer. My father still has to get regular insulin shots, but he's otherwise fit as a fiddle. Whether his ex-girlfriend's ghost was real and trying to warn him, or something his body dreamt up as a hallucination, he still doesn't know. However, he told me never, ever mention anything about this to my mother until the day I die. The young woman in this next story goes to buy some flowers for the equinox holidays, but on her way home encounters something so thoroughly bizarre and mind-bending that she still can't understand it. Find out why in Ohigan. This happened just the other day, and sorry if it's a little lengthy. I visited the flower shop in front of the station to buy flowers for the Ohigan holidays. It's roughly a 15-minute walk there from my house. A simple route that follows the national highway and then a short street leading to the residential area. In the past, this area used to be full of textile factories and such, but the industry went into decline, and with a change in zoning regulations as well, now there's not a single factory left. Or at least, there shouldn't be. On the other side of the road, I saw a large brown building. It was a textile factory, like the ones I'd seen as a kid, but this looked a lot nicer than the ones I remembered. Still, what the hell was this? This area was supposed to be a parking lot. I started to panic. I stood there, frozen on the spot and holding the flowers I'd bought, when some women, probably part-timers, started filing out of the factory. But then I doubted my own eyes once again. Amongst those women was one who looked just like my own mother. Weird. Very weird. Way too weird. The woman who looked like my mother crossed the road and started walking towards me. Stunned, I tried to hide suddenly behind a telephone pole. A wooden telephone pole. It was old. Nothing made any sense anymore. I wanted to cry. During this time, the woman who looked like my mother crossed the road and started walking a little ahead of me, probably heading towards the same house. I wanted nothing more than to go home too, so I pushed myself to start walking. The woman who looked like my mother then turned the same corner I was going to turn. So that is my mother, I thought. And when I rounded the corner to catch up with her, suddenly, headlights blinded me. An old friend was driving, and then she wound down the window. "Hey, long time no see," she said. But then I realized something was off again. I left the flower shop at 3:30 p.m, and yet my friend had her headlights on. I asked her the time. "It's after 6:30, she said. Scared, I turned around to look at the factory, but it was gone. It was a parking lot again. I was basically in tears by the time I said goodbye to my friend and entered the house. But there, my mother was sitting on the couch watching TV while our dog sat on her lap. "Ah, I thought you were reading a few books at the bookstore," she said when she saw me. I handed her the now wilted flowers and told her what had just happened. "Well, your grandmother used to work part-time at a factory," she said. As she arranged the flowers, she continued. "Well, it is Ohigan, after all." As she said that, she looked just like my grandmother in her memorial photo. So, it wasn't my mother who left the factory, but my grandmother. Not all ghosts are terrifying croaks and jerky movements when they're trying to kill you. Some of them are rather polite about it, like the little old lady in this next story. What's she really up to? Find out in Polite Old Woman. Let me tell you about an unpleasant experience I had last night. I was pretty sleepy much earlier than usual, so I went to bed and turned the lights off. I usually sleep on my right side, and when I lie on my right, I can see my bedroom door. Before I got into bed, I was so exhausted, but as soon as I laid down to sleep, for some reason, I was now wide awake. Still, I didn't feel like getting up again, so I just laid there looking at the door. Before long, my heart thudded loudly, like it was going to burst out of my chest. Huh? What the hell? I sensed danger, and when I tried to roll over, of course, I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I always told myself that if I suffered from sleep paralysis, then I would make sure to close my eyes. But I couldn't. My eyes remained open. I broke out in a cold sweat, and my entire body broke out in goosebumps. Everything felt so real. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door, and in the darkness, I could see it was now slightly ajar. Oh, come on. This is not what I want to see, I thought. But on the other side of the door, there was a tiny old woman. She was slightly bent over at the hip and wearing a kimono. Both hands were neatly folded in front of her, and she was staring right at me. Unable to look away from her, I watched as she slowly bowed. She leaned forward slowly, like an enka singer might do. Then she took one step into my room. No! No! Don't come in here! my voice came out much louder than expected, and as soon as it did, I was free to move again. The lights flashed on at the same time. Of course, the door wasn't open. Looking back on it now, she was a terribly polite old woman, but I was honestly so terrified. And finally this week, what causes the young man in this next story to give up gang life and go on the straight and narrow? It's a rather shocking encounter, and one that literally changed his life. Find out why in Why He Quit the Gang. This is a story about the older brother of the girl I dated 7 years ago. I didn't know this until we started dating, but when her older brother was in junior high, he was in a famous bike gang in K City until the 2nd grade of high school. But during that summer, suddenly he quit and decided to go straight. Did something happen? I asked my girlfriend, but she just grinned and told me to ask him myself. One day, when I was hanging out at her house, her brother was there, so I decided that was exactly what I'd do. So, why'd I leave the gang? I suppose I can tell ya. So, when I was in the 2nd grade of high school, I never went. I just hung with me mates every day. I was honestly thinking about joining the Yakuza, so it was looking more and more likely I'd end up in juvie at some point, you know? But during the summer holidays, I got home around 3 a.m. or so one night and someone was in the living room. I thought it was Ma, so I had a sneaky peek. And it was me dead dad. My girlfriend's father died when she was in the lower grades of elementary school, so he would have died when her older brother was in junior high. So I was in me biker gear at the time, and as soon as the word Dad hit my head, I froze, just like that. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move a finger. Dad was just sitting at the table with a ciggy. Then he slowly turned to me and said just one thing. Cut this bullshit out. That was it. Then he disappeared, ciggy and all. As soon as I could move again, I fell on my ass and just stayed there till morning. When Ma got up, she was like, "What on earth are you doing there?" And so, I declared to her on the spot, "I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused you up until now. I'm gonna leave the gang, I swear." The next day, I told me mates that Dad's ghost told me off, so I'm leaving. They all laughed at me, but I was honestly pissing me pants. Even thinking about it now makes me break out in goosebumps. I wasn't sure whether to believe him or not, but when we went to my girlfriend's room, she continued. "Before he saw Dad's ghost, I used to pray at his altar every single day. Please make him leave that gang. Please make him go straight. I was being bullied around that time because of him. I was known all around town as the younger sister of a delinquent, after all. I was just so sad, and it was all his fault. No, maybe it was our father's fault for how he raised him. So, when he told me what happened, I was just like, ha, serves you right." I ended up breaking up with her 2 years later, and now she's married to someone else. But when we broke up, I was honestly pretty scared that her father might show up and pay me a visit too. A big thank you and shout out to this week's Cummy Tier members, Scarly and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 16, out right now. And check out our merchandise store at kowabana-shop.fourthwall.com. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.